Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. I am so glad that you've chosen to join us today, and I hope you're all doing what? Fantabulous. And that's fantastic and fabulous. Put together twice as nice, right?
Absolutely right.
Okay. My special guest today is probably somebody you've heard quite often if you listen to AM 950. His name is Patrick Lilja. He's the play-by-play sportscaster and on-air producer, engineer, and announcer for AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the only progressive voice of Minnesota. Hello, Patrick, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show today.
Thank you, Philip, so much for having me on. As I said right before we started, I've been looking forward to this for several weeks since we set this up. We had to push it back once because of the weather last week. Only a few days, but I was still sad because I've been looking forward to this so much.
So have I, and thank you for joining us today, and this is going to be a great show. Before we delve into your amazing career, would you like to tell the listeners about your early years, like where you went to school, where you were born, where you had your childhood days?
I was born right here in the Twin Cities area in Edina, which is, for those who may not know, I'm sure you do, but it's a suburb of Minneapolis. It's only about 10 minutes from the radio station. It's where I was born. I lived in the Twin Cities my entire life, except for when I went to college. I've lived in several different suburbs of the Twin Cities. My longest family home was actually up in Elk River on the northwest side. I lived there for actually well into my adulthood as well before I relocated down here to be closer to AM 950 when I started here. And I went to high school at the International School of Minnesota, which is also actually very, very close to this radio station, too, only about not even 5 minutes away. So I kind of feel like, in a way, everything's kind of come full circle, that, everything that, was part of my childhood, my grandparents' home that my mom now owns, my high school, my employment, it's all right back where it all started.
All roads lead to Edina.
Right?
Yeah. And what college did you attend again?
I attended the University of Wisconsin-Superior. That was 2009 to 2013. I got a degree in journalism. I spent a lot of time working in the campus radio station. That was kind of my home away from home when I was on campus. I loved being there. I was a DJ for the weeknight jazz program, and then I was eventually given the title of sports director, which I enjoyed it, and it looks good on the resume, but turns out I didn't really do much that my station manager didn't already do while I was there.
So you did the play-by-play for the local sports team for your school? I
did not. There were already people who had been well-established doing that.
I see. Okay.
I was mostly the one who ran the board. I wanted to get into the play-by-play stuff, but it just wasn't really there because the guy who did the college hockey games for us was kind of a local legend in his own right, so there was no place for me to.
Right.
As far as I know, he still does them. It's a man named John Garver. He's certainly one of the people who I credit for helping me get here to this point today, where I'm sitting down with you for this interview. But yeah, he's kind of a local legend. So there wasn't really anything for me to have a chance to announce in college.
Yeah. So, can you tell the listeners how you got involved in sportscasting? Did your love of sports prepare you to pursue a career in that field, or did an event happen, or just liking sports in general, or?
It was kind of both. And there's a saying, not just in media, but and probably a lot of other fields as well, but it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And it's still one of the
that's true, yes.
Yes, it's still one of the wildest stories, I think, that has ever happened in my life, and I insist everything about this is absolutely true. So, several years ago, I began dating someone who lived in the Dallas, Texas area. Well, my then partner had a close friend who lived up here in the Twin Cities, and that person knew Brett Johnson, so that was how I got in touch with Brett Johnson. Of course, the production manager at AM 950, but he also does sportscasting on the side. So my partner's friend got me involved with Brett, so I came out to kind of as a trial run. We did a couple of games with his former business partner, Kevin, and they were impressed. I ran the camera, and I did some color commentary on the side. But where I really got my break was the following fall. This was the fall of 2016. Brett had the Eden Prairie football games, and so Kevin typically did the play-by-play for these, but there was a game that he wasn't available, and then the guy who that they had set up to do one of the games that he couldn't do also came unavailable, so Brett asked, "Hey, Patrick, do you want to do this?" And, of course, I was absolutely thrilled, but, I'd never called a game.
Were you nervous?
I was absolutely nervous because I felt like it was an audition of sorts to,
sure.
say, like, how close do you think you actually are to being able to do this? And so I go out there. The game was actually at the Edina football stadium just a few minutes away from here, and I get over there, and we start calling the game, and Brett and the guy, I think his name was Grant, who was on the color commentary, were like, "You've never done this before?" And I said, "No." And they're like, "You are absolutely fantastic at this."
Look at that.
So
why am I not surprised?
So that was how I kind of got my start, and things kind of evolved from there. Brett had a business associate who I got in touch with. He is kind of a hockey mogul around here in the Twin Cities, so that I started calling hockey, and that's actually where I get the bulk of my work, which is kind of funny because hockey is by far not my favorite sport, but it seems to be where I get the vast majority of my work, and lots of people say, "Wow, you're really, really good at this," and it's just kind of taken off from there. And I have several people who, to varying degrees, call, "Hey, Patrick, can you come out and do a game for us?" And I'll see if it fits in my schedule or not. But it's been great. It's been very eventful last few years that I feel like I do have a lot of people who want me to do things for them to some degree, even if sometimes it's just an emergency fill in or but it's really great to know that I feel like I've come a long way.
Is there a sport that you would have preferred to be doing the play-by-play? For example, baseball or football or something else other than hockey?
Well, football's always been my number one sport, and I usually still get to do a couple games a year. Baseball is one that I would love to do more, but it's tough to do baseball because.
Well, isn't it going to be challenging now with the new rules, especially because I'm even not familiar with the new rules in baseball. I'm hearing that they're going to be timing the pitchers and other things. Is that going to be tough, you think, for these announcers?
Oh, well, just to clarify, I work on the high school level, so all of those things don't apply at that level.
Right.
But yeah, we can certainly talk about that if we want to kind of throw some things in later. But for me, at least, baseball is tough to get because baseball at the high school level is not a high revenue sport, so it's tough for people to want to send crews out there to cover it because they're not making any money. So I don't get to call a lot of it, and it's a little bit of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, but it's a great sport, though, when it comes to spending the day with your family. Mm-hmm. It's a great spectator sport. You bring your kids and spend the day in the hot sun and eat hot dogs and all that stuff.
Right.
So how did you move from sportscasting to working as an announcer and producer engineer for AM 950? And do you currently still do any sportscasting?
I still do the sportscasting on the side. So what had happened was I applied to AM 950 once unsuccessfully. I believe it was back in 2017. And so late in 2019, Brett said they were looking to make a change with the production staff, and he encouraged me to apply again. And so at the time, there were 3 weekday producers, I believe, when I came on board. Uh-huh. And sort of in short order, two of them left, and so suddenly, even though I'd only been on the job about 6 months, I was suddenly the main weekday guy, and it was kind of a surprise for me because I didn't expect to. I went from working 1 day a week to sometimes 5 days a week if I had a weekend shift that week. So it was definitely it was a great change. I was very happy like how quickly things worked out in my favor. But yeah, it was a little rough in the beginning because I'd never worked in commercial radio before until this job. My only experience was the college radio job that I had talked about earlier, which. It's funny to think about, but Brett and Chad are way more laid back than the guys I worked for at that college radio station.
They're really nice people. Yes,
mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah, they're not with the whip and chain. Yeah. So, but how can I put this? When you got the job, were you shadowed first? Did somebody do the work and you watched them, or you did it and they watched you, or can you explain that?
It was sort of a hybrid of that. I'd come in and I'd train with the weekday producers who were there and with Brett, and it was my second day I was here. They were kind of like, hey, let's have you run the board and see how it goes. And I remember Matt McNeil saying on his way out, there have been people who have had a lot worse first days than you have. So I think he was already kind of impressed with. And Matt's a guy who he doesn't just dole out praise. So I think he really meant that when he said, hey, I think you're actually pretty good at this.
Yeah, good. So you were a perfect fit, basically, right?
Sounds like it. Well, I've been here 3 years, so I hope so.
Yeah, good. And so when I'm listening to AM 950 radio, I always hear your voice. Okay, either promoting one of the sponsors or giving the weather or whatever you're announcing for that day. I have two questions for you about that. First of all, how and when did you realize you had a great announcer's voice? Did somebody tell you that? And second question, to piggyback on that, how enjoyable is it announcing as compared to doing other behind-the-scenes duties for AM 950? So let's start with the first question, part of the question.
It's funny. I don't like listening to my voice. I really don't. And
really?
But, yeah, no.
I love it. You have an amazing announcer's. What do you think they hired you?
No, it's and I know I'm far from alone in that regard, that I just don't like listening to my own voice, but actually, it kind of goes back. When I was in childhood, we took a family road trip to Disneyland, and we were coming home, and we were traveling through New Mexico, and we stopped at a restaurant. I believe it's a Village Inn, which, if you're not familiar with that, is very similar to a Perkins type of place. Mm-hmm. And so the waiter had been going back and forth, and he, heard me talking to my family, and he said, commented, do you know how great of a voice you have? Then I was, about 13 years old at the time, and, I think he asked if I'd had vocal lessons or anything like that, which I hadn't, because I'd never really thought about anything like that, and I'd always been enamored with the sports announcers that I would watch on TV, and those guys were kind of my heroes, whether it was Pat Summerall. He was at the very end of his career when I
remember him, yeah.
When I started watching sports, but he was a football broadcaster, a very famous one. Also guys like Vin Scully, who sadly we just lost, I believe, last year.
We just lost Tim McCarver, too,
Tim
right?
McCarver as well. So those were the guys who kind of influenced me as a sportscaster, even though they were kind of at the very end of their careers when I came of age. And but to go back to what you were saying a little earlier, yeah, it was typically, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14 was when I started having people go, wow, you have a voice.
Okay. And the second part of the question, as compared to your behind-the-scenes duties, how do you compare those two? Do you like one better than the other, or?
I do really like when I get to announce things, whether it's the weather, or if it's taping an ad. Typically, there are probably a few things that you hear me monthly. Oh, it's Patrick reading something different for this advertiser this month. Typically, I enjoy doing the I enjoy doing the voiceover stuff because it's a little bit of a challenge because there are little nuances for everything that you do depending on, am I supposed to be energetic in selling this? Is it supposed to be a little more solemn because, it's an ad about, drugs in schools or,
right.
texting while driving that has to be a little bit more of a serious tone. And
right.
every once in a while, like I get an ad that kind of becomes sort of a hybrid of that where I kind of have to, shift my tone midway through to kind of make you sort of, think about, hey, this is fun, but also kind of, think about this sort of, little more serious backdrop that's part of this advertisement as well. So I like the challenge of it because they're all different and it's always nuances to work through.
Yeah, you have to correct me if I'm wrong. You have to bring out the feeling of what you're saying, depending on what it is. For example, if you're advertising a happy occasion, your voice has to change in a happy tone. Am I right? And
yes.
And if it's sad, if you're announcing, you're advertising for I don't know if you advertise for a funeral home or something, you have to obviously change that. So, and you do that amazingly well. You really do. And I know I praise you all the time, but and I'm sure the listeners that do listen to AM 950, they realize it's not easy. I have to come down to your level to speak like you, because I have a higher, pitch to my voice. But you do an amazing job. Did you ever advertise for announce for a particular sponsor that was difficult, that it was challenging for you?
Yes, there was one that was kind of like illustrating sort of the change in tone because it was sort of like an ad that was a cross between a muscle car show and a assisted living / hospice care facility in the same in
the same advertisement.
Yeah. So it was kind of I was starting off like to one of the announcers like to imitate because they're kind of starting off like Monster Jam, sort of like that, and then kind of get
and
through
you did
it.
That?
Because I'm like, well, yeah, because big buff guys coming out to a car show that
right. Yeah.
But then it's kind of while you're there, check out our facilities, in case mom needs to be put.
Yeah, and
assisted living.
Assisted living, yeah. So you got to act, yeah. So you're going from this, aggressive kind of voice to a more subtle, calming voice. And that takes talent, I would say. Yeah. So occasionally, you have produced this show and other shows on AM 950. Can you tell the listeners what your duties are when it comes to the production? And as a follow-up to that question, what are some of your responsibilities when you are engineering on an on-air radio show for the station?
Well, to keep it short, it depends on whether we're taping it pre-recorded or whether we're doing it live. Some of the things will be the same, which will be mostly to check the sound levels, make sure everything sounds good. When the recording's done, to make sure it's edited properly, and make sure it's boosted up to a level that's suitable for radio. So there are some things that are going to be the same across the board. Making sure it gets podcasted. That's my responsibility. Brett will do some of that as well. That's kind of the short of what it entails. It's basically just making sure you hear your programming and it sounds good and you have access to it.
Yeah. And other than the Downright Upright show, are there other podcasts that are simply just podcasts, not radio shows? Or am I the only one at this point?
I don't want to, of course, push anybody out on the. I don't want to diss anybody, but as far as I know right now, you're the only one that's just like that. And somebody's going to write me an angry, "Hey, you forgot about my show." But as far as I know,
no. But I was told, and I went into this knowing that that's what I was doing, and because podcasting is, I never put it down because it is the nouveau way of getting to young people, because that's what I think this station is going for at this point. Because remember, AM 950 has an older demographic. And podcasting is what, Patrick? It's a young thing, right? Young people
Yes.
listen to podcasts. So I think I'm doing that work, correct?
Absolutely, and I think you're doing a great job with that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope my listeners feel the same way as you do. Anyway, so now let's get into something a little more serious here. So you've confided in me that you are on the autism spectrum, and I want to first thank you for agreeing to share that with our audience. Could you talk a little about your journey in terms of defining your personal identity and how that has influenced your relationships with other people?
Yes, of course. So I was diagnosed with what was formerly commonly known in the United States as Asperger's syndrome. That term has largely fallen out of favor both for professional and ethical reasons, although I believe other English-speaking nations still widely use the term, I think the UK being one of them. But I was sort of officially diagnosed. I actually had a conversation with my mom last year, and she said, well, we decided against getting you officially diagnosed because we were worried about the effect it would have on you with your schooling, or if they would, want you to go into special programs or anything like that. She said I was, quote, barely autistic, which that's kind of a problem in itself because, as you said, it's kind of a spectrum. And one way that I've heard it put is some of you more familiar with autism may have heard of the terms high functioning, low functioning, and sort of that. And those terms kind of serve as problems in the community because it sort of dismisses the challenges that high functioning people, quote unquote, face, and dismisses the talents and abilities that, quote, low functioning people have. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why in the autistic community that we've kind of tried to move away from functioning labels, just because it just doesn't paint a good picture of the individual.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell the audience what are some misunderstandings about autism, and what people, some people say, how the rumors go around about certain things. What would you like to clear up, I guess, is what I'm asking about the misunderstandings of autism.
Well, I think one of the main ones is that it's believed that autistic people don't feel empathy, and it's actually the reverse. And myself and like the other autistic people that I know in my life, we feel so much empathy sometimes that it just kind of overwhelms us. And I think that's kind of where that label comes in, that it just gets to be too much. Then we just kind of need to push ourselves away from that because it just gets so overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
There's also, sort of the stereotype of the autistic savant, which most of us are not quite that brilliantly abled.
Yeah. That's true. And I'm going to tell you something you probably don't know. So in my day job, I'm a flight attendant with a major airline, and one of my best friends, one of my dear friends, she runs the autism. We have an autism day every month where we have children who are on the spectrum come to the airport, and we put them on an airplane, and we make believe that it's kind of like they're going on vacation. So they learn about the airplane and stuff like that. And it's something I do and volunteer on my time. So she always asks me, Philip, we need more flight attendants to come down and, because you can't board the plane without flight attendants. In other words, if she was by herself, she couldn't get those children on the plane. So I just wanted you to know that I am backing you 100%. And I think it's, again, those false ideas of what autism is, I'm glad you cleared up some of them. There's also another one I heard, which, and you can tell me if this is true or not. People have an idea that they are inappropriate. Did you hear that one?
I've heard that one many times as well.
can you clear that one up? Because that's not true.
No, it's not true. We just have a little bit of trouble sometimes, I think, really understanding boundaries. And it's not because we mean badly, and I'm not saying
Right.
that, boundaries are boundaries. That's, not negotiable. We just sort of sometimes, I think, have a little bit of trouble understanding that, this is okay, this is not okay. And
Right.
so that kind of comes with some of the social skill difficulties that I went through and I still kind of go through a little bit. But I kind of want to go back because you did ask, of course, about, my personal journey, which I'm sure you might understand this as well. It's not a linear journey. Like, it's not, I was here and then I
Went there, yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of... Because when I was in high school, I was pretty embarrassed about being autistic. It created a lot of social difficulties. I had a very difficult time socially with my peers in high school.
Sounds familiar because the same thing with being a gay boy. I was picked on like all the time, Patrick, all the time. I mean, kids can be mean.
Yes,
very mean. And whether you're a gay child, an autistic child, a heavy child, overweight child, whatever your condition is, they always harp on that and pick on you and make you feel less than. And but look where we are, and look where they probably are now. So,
fortunately for me, I didn't go through the bullying, and certainly, of course, my heart goes out to everyone who did and may still struggle with those traumatic days. But for me, my problem was fitting in. My problem was interacting with other people appropriately. So when I got out of high school and I went to college, there was actually it was in my junior year of college, and there was an event. There was two things that happened pretty much, I think, in the same week. And so my college ran a program kind of about, I don't know if you've heard of this or if the listeners may have. It was called Boxes and Walls, and it was kind of meant to show you sort of, a little slice of what some, various groups go through, on the inside that you probably don't see as an outsider. And, for example, there was a Native American section where, like, oh, you just signed over all of your property and possessions, because that's unfortunately what white Americans did when they colonized the United States, which was basically, force, the Native Americans to sign treaties that a lot of them didn't understand because, of course, they didn't really speak English. They were at a disadvantage in, many ways against the colonists, and, they didn't know what they were agreeing to, and sort of, it was things like that. So anyway, there was one section about and featuring a person playing with a mental condition, and I don't think it was autism, but it was something very relatable to me, and I kind of it kind of got me fired up in sort of a way that I don't think that was the intent of the skit, but I still felt very fired up by like
angry. You mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that kind of caused me to change my thinking a little bit about my autism. And then the other thing was, very shortly after that, it was spring break, so I went home and I was visiting my dad. And my dad was not very supportive of my autism journey. He was a very blue-collar sort of alpha male type of person, and he saw it as, there is nothing good that can come from being autistic. There is, you don't want this out there. You don't want people to know about this. You want to...
I'm so sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. But,
dear.
That was just kind of his view on it. And I still struggle with it now. But anyway, so I went home to visit him, and I was about 21 years old. And at the time, and so I went home to visit him, and so we were sitting in the room that he lived in at his friend's house in his final couple years of his life, and we got on the conversation about autism somehow, and I don't remember what I said, but he said something to the effect of, you've I think we might have been talking about dating, which I think you and I are going to get into later about that. But basically, I was saying, like, well, how do I, talk about my autism with, a potential partner? And he said, well, maybe you just shouldn't. Maybe you should just, pretend that you don't have it because you've come a long way. You've defeated it. And I kind of sat there and I was thinking about, and I didn't say anything to him, but I'm like, I don't think I can do that because, I couldn't. I mean, this was a part of me that, I felt finally, a little bit more at peace with.
Yeah.
And, but to kind of say, though, it's not a linear journey, is I was kind of, because after that I went on a roll. I was really positive about myself, and, I think I reached a point where I said to myself, okay, well, that's great that you're, happy with, being proud of your autism, but what now? And then I kind of started sliding backwards, and I kind of, have kind of struggled to get back to where I was a few years ago regarding being autistic, and sort of being being proud of it and, bettering myself in the way that I, think that I should try to understand who I am.
Right. Well, I just want to thank you for this is a personal journey that you've gone through and are going through, and to share it with the listeners is so amazing. I mean, I hope it's cathartic for you, because I know when I talk about my journey, the abuse that I experienced as a child from my stepfather and the kids in school and et cetera, I find it cathartic to talk about it, because, talking about things that are uncomfortable sometimes makes you get to the point where you can say, okay, I'm accepting that, and now I've passed that. Look where I am now. Does that make sense, Patrick?
Yes, absolutely.
And you have look what you've done. I mean, you're an announcer for a radio station. You're a producer. You're an engineer, and that's amazing. And you should be very, very proud of yourself. And just like I'm very, very proud of me. I mean, I've come a long way. I never thought I'd make it in life, because after you get that self-esteem attacked constantly, you think, oh, I'm never going to make anything out of myself. But I did. I went to school. I did some work in legal studies. I became a flight attendant, and now I'm doing a podcast. So I think I've done pretty well for myself, and I think you and I should be very proud of ourselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So now let's talk about what we identify as. Now, I told the audience, and I'm sure you know, that I identify as gay. And I'm proud of that now. I used to be so closeted. I hated myself so badly, and that's something that we've overcome. You with your autism, me with my, the fact that I'm in the LGBTQ plus community. I love it now. I love it. You don't like me for that? Good for you. I'll move on, because it doesn't bother me anymore. But I identify as gay, and you've shared with me that you identify somewhere on the demi-romantic asexual spectrum. So that's also in the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Firstly, can you explain what that means? Because I personally don't know exactly what that is. I know what asexual is, obviously, but demi-romantic, can you explain that? And the asexuals for some people who don't know what that is. And secondly, can you tell us about the struggle that you experienced growing up as a young person?
Well, basically, to begin, demi-romantic means that if there's a person that I feel I want to be romantically involved with, I have to get to know them quite well. It is happened more than a few times that it has been someone who I have known for years before, and it's almost like a light switch going off, Today, I may think of this person as just a friend, and tomorrow I'm just head over heels. It has been that.
And it could be of either, excuse me for interrupting, it could be of either gender, right? Or it has to be female.
Well, of course, for either gender, for whatever you personally identify as.
Okay, so it could be a queer person,
yes.
It could be a heterosexual person.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes, so yes, they can be of any sort of orientation or inclination but yeah, so
you have to have strong bonding feelings for that person.
Yep, yeah, and like I said, it can happen overnight, and
and you can develop a very strong relationship with someone like that, correct?
Yes. Unfortunately, in my case, none of the people that I have become interested in were interested in reciprocating. So, that
join the club. I'm married now, but it took me 47 years to meet my husband. I had an ex, but that's a whole story. It's another show itself. But yeah, so there's hope for you. Yeah, you're 30. What did you say? You're 32.
32. Yes.
Yeah, I was 47 before I met my husband. And he is the light of my life. I can't even imagine living without him. So don't fret. It's going to happen because you're an amazing person. And, I believe good goes to good, And as far as the second part, the asexual part, explain that as well.
It's kind of interesting because I think that's kind of a spectrum in itself. And there's a friend of mine who I'll credit because he was going through a lot of these same questions, and his journey kind of is where I kind of watched him and the things he was going through and saying, hey, that sounds a lot like me. And I don't want to give his name out, but if he listens to this, just know that I do thank him for helping me sort of find my way too, even if that wasn't obviously his intention, because he was, going on his own journey, and I was watching it and just saying like, hey, that looks like me too. And I think I came to a lot of the conclusions because of this person. And so was going through all of these parts of the spectrum for you, were they a struggle growing up though? Or was it? Did you find it easy to navigate through that? I guess for me, it was just always like that. And I know for other people, it was a lot more of a struggle. And I'm certainly not dismissing anyone who had gone through. But for me, it was just like, what's the big deal about? I don't know, like how. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but when people would, and of course in high school, when people become more involved in investigating their sexuality and especially as a young adult, when you start to meet people who were not happy with their current, I'll be blunt about this, like I haven't gotten any in, a week or a couple weeks, and I'd be like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's like, why, you don't really need that badly.
Yeah, I think a lot of young people focus too much on that rather than the relationship aspect of it, the connection, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even when I was, becoming an adult and, and I'll again be, not, I don't want to be too general, but, of course, sexual issues break up marriages if one person is feeling unsatisfied, and again, like, now I'm in my adult, and I'm still going, what's the big deal about that? Like, why is that something that you would, break up a marriage with somebody that you deeply care for? Is this really that big a deal?
Yeah.
And I just, just to go back to what you were saying earlier, I'd just been always like that. I didn't feel marginalized. I didn't feel like I didn't feel picked on. I didn't feel like there was really something. I didn't even really feel like there was anything wrong with me. I just kind of was. So
you accepted it.
Yeah.
And it was easy for you.
Yeah.
And that's great. And again, on that, issue as well. I want to thank you for sharing that with the audience because, again, this is a personal thing you're sharing with everyone, and it takes it's very cathartic, I think, personally, to come out and speak your truth. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, that's...
Anyway, so now, guess what? We've come to that part of the show I like to call the shift. And remember, it's with an F, because if you don't say the F, we have problems. Where I shift the questioning away from your career and to your opinions on current affairs. Now we're going to talk about the, can I say the S word of the show?
Of course.
The shit show that we're experiencing in this country. As of the taping of this show, we have learned that cell phone text evidence in the Dominion Voting Systems defamation suit against Fox News revealed that Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, et al. Intentionally lied to their audiences about the election being stolen. What are your thoughts about this, and what should be done to make sure it never happens again? Now, how could that even be allowed to happen, lying to an audience?
Well, I think what's finally going to get their attention is this looks like this lawsuit has a very good chance of being successful against these Fox News employees as well as News Corp for I think one of the big problems, unfortunately, is, and I'm saying this to be realistic. I'm not saying this because I support or oppose anything, but just because of the First Amendment, the bar to prove defamation or libel and slander is very, very high in the United States.
It is, yes.
And so the fact that Dominion has gotten as far as they have, I think, is just kind of a win in itself. And the fact that, money talks, and I think, hitting Fox News with some heavy legal damages is probably going to get their attention. But for if you go back probably about 20 years ago, Fox News was sued. This isn't really out in the open that much, but Fox News was sued before for misinformation, 20 years ago, and they argued in court that, we don't have to tell the truth because, we're protected by the First Amendment, and that, the court agreed with them.
Could you believe that?
Yeah.
This is so do you think they should change their name to FAUX, Fox News? Because it's not news. If you're saying what you want to say, how could you call yourself a journalist? How can you, with the straight face, say what I'm saying is true? Like alternative facts. Remember, what was her name? Kellyanne Conway. She coined that term. It's crazy. And plus, not only that, and see if you follow me here, Dominion is a business, okay? They're trying to sell election machines, voting machines, and by you constantly saying these are rigged and they're not good, and don't buy them, and we should stop using them. What's going to happen to they're destroying their business, and it's not true. Everything they're saying about these machines is not true. So they're being hurt financially by this. Their reputation has been sullied, So don't you think they'll win just on that alone?
I certainly would like to think so. I think they, like I said before, of course, proving defamation, that you have been caused harm, at least in the United States compared to other nations, is very high.
Yes.
But I think they have demonstrated that they have
the goods.
Yes, and that that harm has been caused to them by Fox News and Donald Trump and his supporters.
Oh, yeah. Now let's segue into more of Fox News, because we just love talking about Fox News. Can you give us your opinion about Kevin McCarthy giving exclusive access to Tucker Carlson? Okay, these thousands of hours of sensitive security camera video recordings of the Capitol from January 6th without the approval of the Capitol Police. What are your feelings about that?
Well, I certainly think that's extremely unethical, and it probably could compromise any sort of investigations that are still pending, having that video be out in the open like that. So I think there's certainly a lot of legal damage that could be done, especially as it relates to any pending investigations that might still be in the works. I'm assuming not assuming, but I'm aware that there is still a lot going on. A lot of those people are still facing charges, and they're still searching for other people involved in the riot, and so I think it's just a huge. It's a huge. It certainly compromises the investigation.
Yes, but do you think now if you're giving this security footage to only one network, okay, and this network doesn't tend to, but is more right of center than any other station I can imagine, other than maybe Newsmax. But if you give this footage to them, can they use this? Like if there's another insurrection, they'll see all the maps of the inside, the hallways and doors and entrances to different offices. Do you think that's going to compromise the safety of these Congress people, or do you think that's what they're doing with it, or am I being too conspiratorial here?
That's certainly a possibility as well. I don't want to speculate on any particular motive other than, obviously Fox News wants to paint a picture that, these people were heroes who were just doing what they thought was the right thing. And
it was a tourist, what was it called? What did they call it? A tourist excursion?
Yeah, something like that. Of course, we had several members of Congress give these people tours the day before it all happened.
Yes, absolutely. That did happen. So stay tuned for this. This is something I think is very, very precarious and dangerous. Moving on to the next subject of Nikki Haley. You know who she is, right?
Yes.
As you know, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley was quoted saying that DeSantis didn't go far enough with the Don't Say Gay bill. She said teaching sex to children from kindergarten to third grade should be illegal. And I agree that teaching sex, see, that's where she's trying to mislead. So why do people think just talking about the existence of LGBTQ plus people is talking about sex? If that were true, would talking about straight people be talking about sex, straight sex? I mean, I know this sounds very illogical, but bear with me with this, because if you basically are calling LGBTQ plus people sexual, that all we are is a ball of sex, and we don't have feelings and emotions and people we love, you're dehumanizing us. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to say that while certainly the primary target of these bills are the LGBTQ plus community, and that's certainly a travesty and it should be stopped. But I think there is an undercurrent that they do want to remove any discussion of any sort of sexual activity, whether they think the woman should be barefoot and pregnant at 21. She should never leave the house. All she should basically be is a baby-making machine for a man. We don't want her to learn anything else but that.
Sounds like a movie I just saw, Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. Yeah, so while I agree with you that I think the primary target is the LGBTQ plus community, I think there is certainly, we don't want to have any sort of discussion of, bodies or what's going to be happening to people as they be children as they become teenagers, and and that unfortunately that typically leads to very higher rates of teenage pregnancy in states like Alabama and Mississippi, where they pretty much expect no sex before marriage sort of thing, and that's just not how real life is.
Yeah. But again, I think with this, talking about LGBTQ plus people as sexual, I don't know about you, but I'm much more than my sexuality.
Absolutely.
As a person, I mean, I have feelings, I have emotions, I have family. I don't want. I think the fact that they're saying we don't want to teach this to kindergarten, it's kind of like they're saying we want to teach gay sex.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going on at all. I never heard of such a thing in my entire
not at all.
life, that any kindergarten teacher would be saying, well, little boys that are gay do this to other, no, that's not happening.
No, it's not.
And the fact that she brought it up is very, very insulting and damaging to our community.
Yes. And, as you were saying, like it does seem like that is a very common, right wing.
Yeah, it's conspiracy.
Yes.
It's a way to get people's butt. I spoke about this on when I was interviewing JP. The way I think Republicans get butts to the polls is othering people.
Yep.
Do you follow me? Like, I think if you say, those black people are coming for you, or if you say those gay people are grooming your children, it sounds like, I mean, you and I are looking at each other like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But there are people out there that really, really, really think that that's happening.
No, that is absolutely what you're saying, because a friend of mine had pointed out that while the attack on the trans community at the state level is not really new, but he pointed out that since the right-wingers sort of got their way on abortion with Roe v. Wade being overturned last summer, that they need something new to try to get people to come to the polls. So
because they lost that as an issue.
Yep.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Yes.
So now the attention has turned to transgender people, and of course you see just these horrible, these states trying to one-up each other, whether it's Tennessee or Texas or Florida, and they're kind of like, okay, well, Tennessee's bill, goes this far, so we're going to try to take it a step further. And then, Florida says, well, Texas's bill does this, so we're going to take it another step further. And they're just trying to kind of outdo each other with these horrible bills that, are going to do nothing but just cause pain and just terrific discrimination and just awful things.
Well, I'm hoping, though, that Americans have hearts and they understand that there are people that are different, and we all are different. I mean, this, for God's sake, this is the United States of America. We're not a homogenous country to begin with, and there's LGBTQ plus people in every country. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think, I'm hoping that people's humanity comes before their hatred of othering other people. Let's move on to something that's, this really affects me, not personally, but emotionally. We have just passed the 1-year anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war, however you want to. I like to put Ukraine first, but Russia has been intentionally targeting civilians in the war to bring down the morale in the country. What do you think should be done about these crimes against humanity, and what should the UN do about it, rather than just scolding Russia?
Well, the problem with the United Nations kind of lies in how the governance of it works. And
it's a paper tiger as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't do anything.
Yes. So, of course, I'm not an expert on the United Nations, and anyone listening to this should go fact-check this. But basically the short of it is that when the United Nations was formed, 5 countries were given ultimate veto power over any course of action that may be taken by the body, those countries being the United States, the United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, which was inherited by Russia following that country's collapse, and China, which that was originally held by what is now Taiwan, but now that's controlled by by mainland China, the Beijing. Anyway, so these 5 countries were given what was called the United Nations Security Council permanent membership, and they have ultimate veto power over anything that the body does. And so any action against Russia, all they have to do is veto it. It doesn't matter if it's 100-1. It doesn't matter if it's, because all that matters is Russia has ultimate veto power over any action that the United Nations may try to take against it.
Yeah, but why do you... It's amazing to me, though, that they're targeting, civilians in this war, killing children, bombing hospitals, doing all this stuff, and other countries are siding with them. They're saying, "Okay, this is cool." What's your opinion about that? Why do you think they're doing that? Is it political, maybe?
I certainly think there's some political ambition for a country like China, which has sort of been driven through some of its own skeletons in the closet, that they're kind of struggling to be a major player on the world stage in the last couple of years. So they've kind of cozied up with Russia because they see Russia and China don't see a lot of opposition to the United States internationally right now. So they're kind of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing. I don't know what those countries are.
Right. But do you think it's the fact that they're both autocracies? Does that have anything to do? Do you think they're promoting that dictatorial type of government? Because remember, the United States and the West, all of the countries in Western Europe, they're all democracies. So do you think that they're just trying to knock democracy down brick by brick, or what do you think of that?
That might be part of it, but my gut is they're just struggling to find friends in the world right now, and so they just see Russia and China just kind of see each other as, you're one of the very few countries standing up to the United States right now. Let's get together.
Yeah. So I let's move a little bit towards. I don't usually do a lot of Minnesota state politics, but I want to do this today because this is important. So the Minnesota state legislature has passed or is about to pass so much important legislation since the Democrats took over, right? For example, I'm going to name just a couple of things, and this is just really crazy when you think about it. For example, mandating paid sick days, paid family leave, legalization of marijuana, driver's licenses for non-citizens, banning conversion therapy, which is great, the catalytic converter bill, and so much more. Can you explain why such accomplishments can only continue by keeping the House and Senate blue?
Well, my view is that the Minnesota GOP is not for anything. They're simply against things like, well, we don't want paid sick leave. Well, why? Because we don't want it. Well, we don't want legal marijuana. Well, why? Because we don't want it. And so the only way anything was going to get done was for one party or the other to take total control of the state government.
I agree 100%.
And I'm honestly a little bit, I don't want to say surprised. I should say pleasantly surprised, because especially on the Senate side, where the DFL only has one seat of advantage in the state Senate, how far some of these initiatives have gone, especially with things like clean energy. Because I know the one person that Brett and I had talked about was the guy who represents the area that includes Hermantown and the Iron Range area, and Brett and I were kind of like, that guy's never going to agree to any sort of major environmental reforms, and he did. I was pleasantly surprised that he would, because I thought, no, there's no way the guy who represents the Iron Range is going to agree to that, and he did.
Yeah, so there are some people who do have values, right? I wanted to ask you a question that I ask every guest, because now that we're in the political election voting era, 2023, we're going to be starting our primaries soon in the country. I want to know what your opinion is of who do you think will win. Again, this is a prognostication. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I've asked everyone, and some people gave me some really interesting answers. Who do you think will be the Democratic nominee for president, and who do you think will be the Republican nominee for president?
On the Democratic side, I'm feeling pretty confident it'll be Joe Biden again.
Okay.
I don't deal too much on whether he should or should not. That's not really my business at this point. I kind of think unless he's not running, no one else is going to run.
Okay.
At least that's my view on it. On the Republican side, I'm still fairly confident it'll be Donald Trump.
Oh, geez.
One more time. And that's for a number of reasons. That the first thing is, even though the establishment wants Ron DeSantis, Rupert Murdoch wants Ron DeSantis, and he'll push Ron DeSantis on Fox News, and Fox News doesn't cast any votes. They, of course, influence voters, a lot of them, but
by lying, yeah.
Yes, but at least in my view, the electorate, by and large, still wants Donald Trump.
And if there's a big field, he's got a 25% like hardcore support group.
Yeah.
So that you're right. I think it could be him.
Yeah, and I just think, and this is kind of this is a cynical and pessimistic take, but I do firmly believe it, that Donald Trump is an authentically cruel human, and I think
I agree.
I think a lot of the people who have come, whether it's Ted Cruz or Ron DeSantis or whoever, that have kind of tried to pick up the pieces of what was left in the wake of Trump losing the 2020 election, and this is going to sound strange because obviously there was a lot of, horrible legislation being passed in places like Florida, but I just feel like those people, they cannot match the authentic cruelty of what Donald Trump was pushing that has appealed to, not all of his base. I don't want to generalize that, but, either that his base either goes, yeah, I'm totally for, the cruelty, or, the people who say, well, I accept the cruelty because either he's not a Democrat or, because he has other things that I like. But, and the way that I saw Donald Trump in terms of I think he still holds a very, very strong hold on middle America, and that,
yeah,
and what I think that's because
he sells a load of what.
Yeah, but and just because he was the first political candidate in a long time who pretended to give a shit about them.
Yeah.
And I'm not. He didn't, but he was the first one to Democrats are often criticized that they don't care about anything between I-5 and I-95, and I think for a large, for many establishment Republicans, that was also the case. But, Donald Trump was the first one to look at, people in Michigan and Ohio and say, Pennsylvania. If you think Donald Trump is popular in outstate Minnesota, I've heard it's absolutely just insanity in some of these other Rust Belt states that you go out in the rural parts of those states, and it's just, they absolutely adore Donald Trump.
They have flags and they have all this stuff. But I just want to end the show with one statement, and this is what I want everybody to get out of this. If you're right, and it is Donald Trump, they have to look at the last 4 years, the 4 years of his presidency. What happened in the 4 years of his presidency? The only thing that was accomplished, if you want to call it that, was what? That he cut taxes for very rich people like himself. Because again, a narcissist only wants things to happen for him. Everything is about him. So when he finally did that, he didn't do anything for those poor white people. He did nothing for them. But they seem to think that he did. And it's amazing to me how they were hoodwinked into believing that they got something out of that. Does that make sense, Patrick?
Yep.
Anyway, Patrick, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. And again, I'd like to thank you so much for spending some time with me and sharing your thoughts and, again, sharing your personal journeys with the audience. And for more about Patrick Lilja, you can follow him on Twitter at Highwayman3561. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Patrick?
right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got the old one, but I fixed it. And again, thank you so much for coming on the Downright Upright Show today. And to the listeners, thank you for spending time with us today. And please stay tuned for more of the Downright Upright Show in the near future. This is your host, Philip Anthony, saying ciao for now. Thank you.